Thank you, Bill, for that visionary speech. And I'm going to briefly, because I think the time is becoming an issue, very briefly introduce another visionary from Pittsburgh, Mr. Grant Oliphant. Mr. Oliphant is president and CEO of the Pittsburgh Foundation, which is the most significant, in my mind, entity in the non-governmental sector in Pittsburgh. And he has made it so. After he took over as president, he has been, again, thinking strategically. There's no other way to describe it. And he has introduced programs that have become iconic benchmarks for the rest of the country. He has really transformed the foundation. He is using the foundation to transform Pittsburgh, and I'm sure he'll be a partner with Mr. Peduto in achieving the vision that was articulated. So in terms of actually making this happen, a very, very important player, Mr. Grant Oliphant.
Good morning, everybody. Let me do that again and get some energy back. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I just want to say a few words. John asked me this morning to talk about the nonprofit sector, what we call the nonprofit sector in the U.S., what internationally is known as the NGO sector, and the role that we can play in the work that we're talking about here. I want to quickly start off by saying I'm a huge John Camillus fan. We've worked together for over a decade now. He's an inspiring human being, and he's brought together an impressive, it's no surprise to me that he's brought together such an impressive group of other folks doing important work, including Bill. I do want to point out, if you want a shorthand version of what I'm going to say, Bill took a group of us on a journey last night, and he delivered as promised in getting us exposed to the city and completely lost. And it took a member of the nonprofit sector, my good friend and colleague, John Wallace, who I don't know where you are in the room, John, but it took John to bring us home. But we did find our way. We just had an important anniversary in the States to mark the passage of the Civil Rights Act in the U.S. And there was a lot of commentary in the context of that. There was a repeated invocation of a quote that I'm very fond of from Martin Luther King, where he said that the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. And there's something blandly reassuring in that quote. I've always loved that quote, but there's something blandly reassuring in it for people who care about what he was talking about, because it seems to suggest that history takes care of itself. And it's fundamentally false. If you look at the history of human progress, it is possible for history to go in the wrong direction for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And the only way that the arc of history bends towards justice is when people apply themselves to trying to make that so, and to working in ways that often don't necessarily seem to be contributing to the ultimate result, but add up to it over time. I believe that's part of the task that we're here to do today. I'm very fond of the management guru Peter Senge, who has been talking lately about three numbers, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with his three numbers. If you are, I apologize for being repetitive. But the numbers are 1.5, 2, and 3. Now I'll sit down. No, okay. So 1.5 refers to the number of Earths that it would take for for us to sustain the present level of energy use that we're incurring as a planet. So in order to continue down the path that we're on, we need an additional half an Earth. So maybe we can solve that problem today. The second number, 2, refers to the number of people in billions who will not have access to adequate sources of water by the year 2030. Promising a future of sustained conflict and war and disputes over the most basic human need. And then the third number, which is the one that really grabbed my attention, is 3. And that refers to the fact that if you look at statistics globally, for every person on the planet who dies from an act of violence, either through homicide or war or terrorism, 3 people die from their own hand by suicide. So what we have, if you look at Peter Senge's three numbers, is a crisis of humanity on the planet. And there is an illusion, particularly I think in American society right now, but you see it globally among the very rich. We see it increasing with the wealth disparity that is worsening in many societies around the globe. There is a notion that by being wealthier, you can protect yourself against the implications of those numbers. And that is also fundamentally false. There is no gated community with walls high enough that will protect you ultimately from that crisis of humanity. The role of any conference like this, at its root, is to get to how we bend the arc of the moral universe towards empowering everyone so that we address this crisis of humanity. And that, I believe, is the work of the nonprofit sector. When we look at Pittsburgh, and Bill mentioned this, and I have to say it publicly and often, I am so grateful that we will have a leader like Bill as mayor of the city, because he's a big thinker and has big ideas, and he wants to work hard on the ground where it counts. And if you know something about municipal corruption in cities and how mayors often work, that's a pretty rare commodity among political leadership, and so I'm very grateful about it. I moved to Pittsburgh 20 years ago from Washington, D.C., and the city I moved into was at its absolute nadir. It was a community that had been riding high as the king of global steel. We were on the map globally for industry, and when I walked in 20 years ago, the city had lost all hope. It spoke about its greatness in the past tense, and there was no sense of opportunity going forward. What people did talk about was that we needed to bring jobs back by bringing steel back. And that was about the best notion that people could put on the table to think about reinventing the future. What's happened over the past 20 years is that instead of focusing just on how do we bring steel back, the community engaged in a different conversation, which is about how do we bring community back. And the role of the NGO sector, to use the international term, has been to help the community focus on that broader discussion about the values that we want to have guide us. So it's possible when we get into a meeting like this and we're focusing so extensively on technical details, which we have to do around how we electrify villages and how we bring a different type of energy to communities, to get lost in the technicalities of that. I want to root you in the humanity of it, because it is about focusing on a set of human values and the type of communities we want to create. In Pittsburgh, what happened through the work of the nonprofit sector was that we focused on art, we focused on culture, we focused on reinventing the riverfront so that they were accessible. Bill talked about these, but so that they were transformed from industrial waterways to places where people wanted to congregate and gather. We also focused on schools and addressing the fact that our schools are in so many cases broken and producing children who are not equipped to work in a 21st century economy. We focused on neighborhoods and trying to translate the big systemic challenges that the community has faced down to a neighborhood level where people actually live. Because in a city like Pittsburgh, what you discover is we have 80-some neighborhoods in the city of Pittsburgh. Each one is distinct. None works quite like the other. And if you think that you can provide social change on a mass level without acknowledging that people are different in different neighborhoods and communities, you miss the most important detail of our humanness. So we focused on neighborhoods, and we focused lately in our work at the foundation on how to promote, even in the United States, which should pride itself on being a birthplace of democracy, how to recreate values of democracy where people feel a sense of ownership and connection with changing their own destiny. When I look at the role of the nonprofit sector globally, or of the NGO sector globally, I think three things really emerge as critically important, and these are three that I'd like you to keep in mind for the conversations that you're having about how we can contribute to what you're doing. One is that this sector, it operates differently from country to country. In India, it tends to be a recipient of government funds that translate services out into the community. In the US, it tends to be a recipient of private funds through private largesse, and translates innovation out into the community. And I think actually that's a model that we need to focus on generating more, promoting innovation through private means to support changes in how government operates and changes in how the private sector operates. Second role of the NGO sector is to support this broader set of community and human values. So when we have a conversation like this, and I'm sorry if my Peter Senge numbers feel a bit heavy, but I think the role of the NGO sector is to also remind us what it is that we're fighting for, and that we are fighting for a world in which there is equity, in which there is justice, and in which we don't need walls to keep people who are different from us out. And then the third is to support, and this is a growing trend both in the US and internationally, the third is to support the fundamental concept of engaging people in how we plan to change their destiny. The concepts that we use in this field are resident engagement or community engagement or individual empowerment. But we, I think, as cultures and societies around the globe, have got to stop trying to impose really smart solutions invented by government leaders that never work on the ground, and instead reverse that equation, as Bill said, and start engaging communities in reinventing their own destiny and letting them be part of the conversation. I'm a huge fan of a whole process that's been generated somewhat out of Stanford University, but it's sweeping the globe now, and it's just, the simple term for it is design thinking. Thinking differently about the problems that we face based on designing solutions for the challenges that really exist. And the fundamental concept of design thinking is that you ask the people who are going to benefit from the change what they really need. And I think that's a principle that we should keep in mind during this conversation. Alexis de Tocqueville wrote about the US 3 centuries ago that, and I'm not being a native to the US, I'm actually a native of Australia. My wife tells me I'd be a lot cooler if I still had the accent. But you know, I'm very taken with this concept that, you know, he said, America is great because it is good, and the moment that it ceases to be good, it will cease to be great, which is, for some of us watching our politics today, a bit of a concern. I think the same holds true just for humanity. It is we will be great. We will accomplish what we want. We will be the society that we hope to achieve when we get back in touch with our goodness as a source of our greatness. And I just urge our group to focus on that today. Thank you.